We don't need you anymore, Mom. That's what my daughter said, right before I fell. The evening had begun like any other carefully staged family ritual, steeped in the scent of rosemary chicken and polished wood. Becca's house gleamed under soft lighting, the kind that makes you feel as though you've stepped into a magazine spread rather than a home. Every cushion perfectly placed, every frame aligned, warmth replaced by symmetry. She greeted me with that tight, stretched smile she always wore, the one that said duty, not love. "Mom, you made it. Finally," she said, brushing her palms together as if wiping away obligation itself. Evan sat at the dining table, half turned toward his phone, half pretending to listen. "Traffic was bad," I murmured, setting down the pie I'd baked. I'd spent the whole morning on it. Homemade crust, hand-cut apples, a touch of cinnamon the way my late husband used to like it. Becca looked at it the way people look at leftovers. "Oh," she said, "you didn't have to go to all that trouble. We bought dessert." She nodded toward a bakery box, pristine pastries lined up like soldiers. Evan chuckled without looking up. "Guess we'll be having pie for breakfast." That laugh wasn't cruel, just careless, the kind that makes you feel small without anyone noticing they've done it. I smiled because that's what mothers do when they're outnumbered. I told myself not to take it personally, but resentment has a way of slipping beneath your ribs, quiet and steady. I'd come to be part of the family, to share a Sunday meal. Instead, I already felt like an intruder in my own daughter's life. "Dinner's almost ready," Becca said briskly. "Could you grab the napkins from the porch cabinet?" She pointed toward the front door. I hesitated, just a moment too long, and caught the flicker of irritation in her eyes. "They're right by the railing," she added, her voice sharp as glass. Outside, the air carried that cool, early autumn bite, the kind that wakes up old joints. The porch light cast long, golden streaks across the boards. For a moment, I felt steadied by the familiarity of it. Wood, light, the distant hum of cicadas. Then I reached for the railing. It gave way with a sound I'll never forget, a sharp crack, followed by the sickening tilt of the world. My wrist struck the step first, then my hip, then the hard slap of earth. The smell of pie still clung to me, sweet and faintly burnt. The silence afterward was enormous. "Mom." Becca's voice came at last, thin and uncertain, then laughter, soft, startled, horribly out of place. Evan's deeper chuckle followed, the kind people use when they don't know what else to do. "I told her that railing was loose," he said. "She's always been stubborn." I tried to speak, but pain tangled my words. When I pushed myself up with my good hand, my vision swam. They stood a few steps away, whispering. I couldn't catch every word, but I heard the tone, annoyance dressed up as concern. "Mom, you scared us," Becca said finally, stepping closer. Her voice took on that rehearsed calm she used with difficult clients. "You really need to watch where you're going." She brushed dirt from my sleeve as if I were a clumsy child, not a 69-year-old woman who had just fallen down her own steps. "I'm fine," I lied, though my wrist throbbed in time with my pulse. Pride does that. It keeps you upright when your body begs to collapse. The porch light flickered overhead. That's when I saw it. The split in the railing, clean and unmistakable. Not rot, not weathered decay. Cut. The wood fibers were too neat, too deliberate. My breath caught, but I said nothing. Inside, dinner was served as though nothing had happened. Becca poured wine, Evan carved the chicken. I sat with my hand wrapped in a towel sling, watching them laugh over something on his phone. My hip ached whenever I shifted, but the deeper pain was the distance, how effortlessly they'd moved on. Becca noticed my silence only when I didn't eat. "Mom, you're making it weird," she said lightly, spearing a roasted potato. "We were all just startled." Startled, not worried, not sorry. Evan added, "Maybe it's time we start thinking about one of those assisted communities for you. Safer, you know?" His voice was syrup smooth, kind on the surface, but I caught the glint in his eye when he said, "Your house would sell fast." Something cold stirred beneath my ribs. They thought I didn't see it. Thought old meant blind. I nodded slowly, forcing a smile. "Maybe," I said. "That might be wise." My voice was calm, the voice of someone giving in. But inside, my thoughts sharpened like glass. As they laughed over dessert that wasn't mine, I stared at the dirt still clinging to my hands. My husband used to say you learn a person's truth by how they treat silence. Theirs was heavy, calculated. When I finally left, Becca hugged me too quickly, her perfume stinging my throat. "Next time, be more careful," she said, as if my fall had merely inconvenienced her evening. I walked to my car beneath the porch light. The railing hung crooked at the edge of my vision, its wound catching the light like a warning. I paused, brushing my fingers along the split edge. Smooth, sawed clean. They thought they'd fooled me. The drive home passed in silence, broken only by the hum of tires and the ache settling into my bones. Humiliation lingered longer than pain ever could. By the time I reached my cottage, I knew two things. My daughter's smile had become a mask, and someone had loosened far more than a railing. They'd been cutting me out long before I ever fell. The morning after the fall, I woke before the sun, every bone in my body aching. My wrist throbbed with a dull, insistent pain. But it wasn't just my body that hurt. It was the memory of their laughter. That sound kept circling my thoughts like a fly that refused to leave. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my swollen hand, thinking about how quickly my daughter had brushed it all aside. The house was quiet, broken only by the ticking clock in the hallway. That sound used to comfort me. Now it felt sharp, almost accusatory, as if it were keeping time with my anger. I made my way to the kitchen one careful step at a time, guarding my wrist. Even pouring coffee felt like effort. I spilled some on the counter and stood there watching it spread, dark against the pale surface, surprised by how close I was to tears, not from pain, but from how invisible I had become. When my phone rang, I almost let it go. Seeing my daughter's name tightened my stomach, but I answered. "Morning, Mom," she said, cheerful and controlled, the same voice she used with clients. "How's the wrist?" "It's sore," I replied quietly. "Pretty swollen." "Well, that's what happens when you don't hold on properly. You really have to be more careful at your age." Her tone wasn't cruel, just empty, polite in the way that signals a conversation is already over. "I think the railing was broken," I said after a pause. "It didn't look old or weathered, the wood—" "There was nothing wrong with that railing," she cut in. "Evan checked it last month. You probably just slipped. You've been a little unsteady lately." Unsteady. She said it like a diagnosis. I could already hear the story forming in her mind. Her aging mother, clumsy and unreliable. It stung because I knew it wasn't true. I'd lived in that house for more than 40 years. I knew every creak in the porch, every nail I'd driven in myself. "I'll have my wrist checked today," I said, keeping my voice level. "Good," she replied, relieved. "And Mom, try not to overthink things. It's not good for you." When the call ended, I stared at the phone. Overthink. Her way of saying don't notice what I don't want you to see. The silence in the house pressed down on me. I went to the window and looked out at the yard, frost still clinging to the grass. Everything outside looked steady, ordinary. Inside me, something had shifted. I replayed the night again and again. Her sigh when I fell, the way Evan didn't move, how their laughter softened into whispers. I wrapped my wrist in a dish towel and stepped back onto the porch. The cold air stung my cheeks. In daylight, the railing looked worse. The break was too clean, the edge too smooth, not the splintered decay of old wood. I ran my good hand along it, feeling the precision of the cut. Someone had done this recently. My eyes moved to the side gate, the one that always stuck unless you lifted it just right. It stood slightly open. My chest tightened. Someone had been here. Maybe not yesterday, maybe earlier, but someone had been here. Inside, I went to the small desk where I kept my important papers, deeds, insurance documents, my will. The folder felt thinner in my hands. I opened it and counted the contents twice. 2 pages were missing. The deed to my house and a copy of my home insurance. I stared at the empty space, my pulse climbing. It was one thing to fall. It was another to realize someone had been preparing for it. For years, I'd ignored the small signs. Missing mail, the way Becca deflected whenever money came up, Evan's casual jokes about downsizing me into a retirement community. I told myself they were harmless. Family was supposed to mean safety, but standing there with my wrist wrapped and that folder half empty, I knew better. They thought I was slow. that I wouldn't notice, that they could make decisions about my life without asking. I sat at the kitchen table as morning light crept across the floor, and for the first time in years, I let myself feel the anger I'd swallowed whole. Every time Becca spoke to me like a child, every eye roll, every patient smile Evan wore as if I were an inconvenience. Maybe they still saw me as the woman lying on the ground, confused, helpless, but they were wrong. I wasn't broken, I was awake. The waiting room at Blue Ridge Community Clinic smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. I sat near the window, my wrist wrapped in a thin scarf because the swelling made my sleeve too tight. Every time I shifted, pain pulsed through my bones, a quiet reminder of the night before. Around me, people scrolled through their phones, flipping past minutes of their lives without ever looking up. I wondered if anyone noticed me at all. Maybe that was what growing older really meant, becoming part of the background of other people's days. When the nurse finally called my name, I followed her down a narrow hallway. Her shoes squeaked softly against the floor, her pace just a little too quick for my stiff legs. "This way, Mrs. Ayrton," she said, with the practiced brightness people use when they don't want to linger on sympathy. She asked about my pain level, and I told her it was a 6, though it felt like more. "Try to stay still," she said as she took my blood pressure, missing the way my fingers trembled when she tightened the cuff. The doctor came in a moment later, young, maybe mid-30s, with a kind face and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much too early. "Good morning, I'm Dr. Monroe," he said, extending a hand I couldn't shake. His smile softened when he saw my wrist. "Let's take a look." He was careful, his touch steady, but when he turned my hand slightly, pain shot up my arm. I gasped, and he stopped at once. "Did you fall directly on this?" he asked. "Off a porch," I said. "The railing broke." He paused, pen hovering. "Broke?" "Yes," I replied slowly, watching his face. "It split, cleanly." He looked up from the chart. "What do you mean by that?" "Like it was cut," I whispered. "Not old, not worn, just gone." He studied me for a long moment, not with the polite disbelief I'd grown used to, but with careful attention. "That doesn't sound like normal wear and tear," he said quietly, "especially not on a railing that's been stable for years." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Someone had finally said it out loud. "Could someone have done it on purpose?" I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he set his pen down. "I'll document exactly what you told me," he said. "That kind of detail matters if questions come up later." "Questions from who?" I asked. "Insurance, possibly the police," he said carefully. "I'm not saying anything happened, but your description raises concern." Concern, such a gentle word for what churned in my chest. I nodded. He wrapped my wrist firmly and told me to rest. I thanked him, my voice unsteady. Walking back down the hallway, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because someone believed me, heavier because now it was real. Outside, the mountain air was sharp and cold. The sky pressed low and gray over Asheville. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment before heading home. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. Becca. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Mom, did you really tell people you think we broke your railing?" Her voice was icy, every word clipped. "The clinic called about some kind of report. Do you have any idea how that makes us look?" "I didn't tell anyone anything," I said evenly. "I told the doctor what happened." "Well, maybe next time you should think before making wild accusations," she snapped. "Evan's furious. He checked that railing himself last week. You fell because you're stubborn, not because anyone hurt you." Her words struck harder than the fall. "Becca," I said softly, "I know what I saw." "What you saw was an accident," she replied. "Please don't turn this into drama. People already talk." People, her favorite shield, neighbors, friends, anyone whose opinion mattered more than mine. I thought about telling her about the missing documents, but I stopped. It would only give her something else to twist. "I'm fine," I said instead. "I wasn't worried," she replied and hung up. I stood on the sidewalk listening to the deadline, the sting settling deep in my chest. I wasn't sure which hurt more, the fall or knowing my own daughter didn't believe me. When I got home, the house felt almost too quiet. The faint smell of my husband's old pipe tobacco still clung to the curtains, the way certain memories refused to leave. I sat at the kitchen table and traced the edge of the bandage on my wrist. I thought of the years I'd helped Becca, covering her student loans, paying her bills when she lost her job, co-signing the house she lived in now. I'd given her everything I had, and still, she saw me as a problem to manage. That's when I heard it, a car door closing outside. My heart jumped. I looked out the window and saw a patrol car parked in front of my house. Two officers stepped out, an older man with gray at his temples and a younger woman holding a notebook. My pulse raced, but I wasn't afraid. I opened the door before they knocked. "Mrs. Ayrton," the woman said. "I'm Officer Cortez. This is Officer Beck. We received a report from the clinic. May we come in?" I stepped aside. They asked careful, respectful questions about the fall, the railing, my family. When we went out to the porch, the younger officer crouched near the brake, running her fingers along the edge. "This is clean," she said, looking up. "Too clean." My stomach tightened, a strange mix of fear and relief. Beck nodded. "Doesn't look like rot. We'll take photos." For the first time since the fall, something inside me eased. They saw it too. They didn't laugh. They didn't dismiss me as confused or dramatic. That night, I sat alone on the couch, the house dark around me. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked and fell silent again. I thought of Becca's cold voice. I thought of my husband's steady hands building that porch all those years ago, and I made a decision. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't plead. I would stay quiet and let the truth speak for itself. I didn't have to wait long for the rumors to start. In a town like Asheville, news moves faster than wind through the mountains. The officers came back twice, each visit bringing more photos, more quiet questions. The neighbors noticed, and soon enough, so did my daughter. The first time Becca called, her voice wavered, though she tried to keep it steady. "Mom, what are you telling people? Evan says the police came by again. This is getting out of hand." "I haven't told anyone anything," I said evenly. "They're doing their job." "Well, they shouldn't be showing up at our house asking questions," she snapped. "Do you realize how that looks? Evan's reputation is at stake. You know how important his clients are." The anger rose slowly, deliberately. "Is that really what you're worried about? How it looks?" "Of course I am," she shot back. "We're being made to look like criminals because you tripped on your own porch." The word struck hard. Even now, she refused to acknowledge that something was wrong. I wanted to scream, to tell her how deeply that fall had cut me. Not just wood against bone, but the sound of her laughter replaying in my head. But I didn't. Anger wouldn't change who she had become. "The railing was cut, Becca," I said quietly. "They found tool marks. You can ask the officers yourself." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her tone had turned falsely gentle. "Mom, you don't really believe that, do you? Inspections go wrong all the time. Maybe it just split clean." I said nothing. Silence, I had learned, unsettles people far more than shouting ever could. Over the next few days, the calls continued, first from Becca, then from Evan. His voice was colder, stripped of pretense. "Nancy, this has gone far enough," he said. "You're embarrassing yourself. The insurance company contacted me today about some policy issues. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" "Policy issues?" I repeated slowly. A pause. "Standard updates. We reviewed your coverage a while back. I told you." "No," I said firmly. "You didn't." He exhaled, heavy and condescending. "You probably forgot that happens." Something in me finally snapped. I'd spent years letting comments like that pass. The jokes about my memory, the way he talked over me. Not now. "I don't forget things like that," I said. "Well," he replied briskly, "either way, it's all blown out of proportion. You're lucky they're not charging you for wasting their time." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, shaking with anger and disbelief. Wasting their time. My wrist was barely healed, and they were worried about embarrassment. That evening, Officer Cortez called with an update. "Mrs. Ayrton, we've confirmed the marks on the railing are consistent with a saw blade. The lab is checking for residue. We've also found inconsistencies in your property records." "Inconsistencies how?" I asked. One version filed with the insurance company shows your name partially removed. Another lists Evan Miller as an alternate beneficiary. We're investigating who submitted it. I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling. I didn't need proof to know who was responsible, but hearing it spoken aloud still hurt. My own family had tried to erase me, first on paper. The realization hollowed me out, not with fear, but with a disappointment so deep it left nothing untouched. The next morning, Becca arrived without warning. Her hair was undone, her composure fraying. "Mom," she said, stepping inside without waiting, "you have to stop this before it ruins us." "Ruins you," I corrected. She flinched. "Do you know how hard Evan has worked for his business? The police were at his office yesterday. People are talking." "Then maybe he shouldn't have filed false documents," I said calmly. "Listen to yourself," she cried. "Do you really think we'd ever hurt you? You're making everything dramatic." Her voice cracked, and for a moment I saw the child she once was, the girl who used to fall asleep on my lap during storms. That memory hurt more than anything else. "Becca," I said softly, "I gave you everything I had. You think I don't recognize the sound of a lie? I taught you how to tell the truth." She looked away, jaw clenched. "You've always made everything about you," she muttered. "Maybe you should have moved into a home like people your age are supposed to." The words burned, sinking deep where they would never fully fade. I didn't answer. I simply opened the door and waited. After a moment, she walked past me without looking back. As her car disappeared down the street, the air felt heavier but clearer. My silence was no longer weakness. It was resolve. For the first time, they would have to sit with the sound of their own choices. The days grew quiet after the final police visit. The porch was repaired, the railing smooth and solid again, yet every time I ran my hand along it, I still felt the splinter that no longer existed. The investigation was over, but its echoes remained, in the creak of the floorboards, in the silence that followed once the phone stopped ringing. When the call finally came, it was Officer Cortez. Her voice was gentle but assured. "Mrs. Ayrton, the case is closed for now. There will be no arrests, but both your daughter and son-in-law are under civil review. There's evidence of document tampering and insurance fraud. You were right to report it." I thanked her, though my voice sounded softer than I expected. After I hung up, I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the clock tick on the wall. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt the hollowness that comes after a long storm has passed. I had been right, but being right didn't bring peace. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, I made tea and sat on the porch. The light was soft and golden, brushing leaves that hadn't yet fallen. The world felt calm, but my thoughts refused to settle. I thought about how easily kindness is mistaken for weakness, how silence is often read as surrender. For years, I had given my daughter everything, my savings, my time, my heart, and she treated my love like a bill that never stopped coming due. The phone buzzed on the table beside me. Becca's name lit the screen. I nearly ignored it, but curiosity won. "Mom," she said, her voice tight. "I don't know what you told those people, but Evan's losing clients. They're saying things about us that aren't true." I didn't answer. She inhaled sharply, the sound edged more with anger than grief. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to us? You're destroying your own family." "My family." The words tasted bitter. "I didn't destroy anything, Becca," I said calmly. "I just stopped pretending I didn't see." There was a long pause, then her voice cracked. "You've always wanted to make me feel small." That hurt more than I wanted to admit. Even now, she cast herself as the victim. "No," I said softly. "I wanted you to remember where you came from. I wanted you to understand that a home isn't something you inherit. It's something you protect." Silence stretched between us so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, in a voice so small I almost missed it, she said, "You've changed, Mom." "No," I whispered. "I just stopped apologizing." The call ended with a quiet click. I stared at the dark screen, my reflection faintly staring back. There was no satisfaction in her unraveling, only a dull ache I couldn't shake. I miss the version of her who once laughed beside me in the kitchen, flour on her hands, the little girl who ran into my arms after scraping her knee. Somewhere along the way, that child had disappeared, replaced by someone who saw kindness as something to exploit. A knock sounded just as the light faded. When I opened the door, Mrs. Harper from next door stood there holding a pie. "I heard about everything," she said gently. "You did the right thing, Nancy. Some people only stop laughing when the truth bares its teeth." Her words tightened my throat. I thanked her and watched her walk back down the path. That simple kindness meant more than any apology my daughter could have offered. Later, I returned to the porch, wrapping a shawl around my shoulders. The stars were faint behind thin clouds, but the air smelled clean, washed free of the lies and whispers that had lingered for months. I realized then that I wasn't angry anymore. Not truly. The resentment had burned itself out, leaving something quieter, steadier in its place. Peace. I thought about what I'd lost. Trust, family, the illusion that love alone can fix anything. And I thought about what I'd gained. I had reclaimed my home, my name, and the truth I'd spent years avoiding. I didn't need anyone's approval to feel whole. I only needed the strength to stand when no one else would. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. I looked across the yard to the fence my husband had built with his own hands. The wind moved through the trees, soft and forgiving. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt present, rooted in the quiet and in myself. If you've ever been told you were too old, too soft, or too small to matter, remember this. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. You only have to stop whispering when it's your life being spoken over. And as I sat beneath that quiet North Carolina sky, I knew one thing for certain. Sometimes, the strongest revenge is simply refusing to disappear.